African Development Bank signs $4.8 million grant to the African Union for the implementation of the AfCFTA. Federal government savings bonds records 13.4 billion naira investments. Fragile calm returns to stock markets after U.S. President Donald Trump added 10% tariff to China. This is Business Express, and it is reaching you from Abuja, the nation's capital. I am Leah Katun Babatunde. It is no longer news that the African Continental Free Trade Area Agreement is coming to force. For policymakers as well as business community, it's time to prioritize, develop and implement smarter local strategies to seize the rising opportunities in manufacturing and industrialization across a variety of sectors, while increase the global competitiveness of the continent. The ultimate goal is to decrease the need for import by African countries of produce with local production capacities. Africa's manufacturing sector is projected to double in size, with annual output increasing to $3 trillion by 2025, while creating over 14 million jobs.
Production hub in Africa of all things, consumer goods, capital goods and so forth. So this is our plan, and we are anticipating this. I believe, this is not the opinion of the bank, that we have just a short window of opportunity. The next 4 or 5 years, Nigeria needs to move very rapidly, very forcefully and very deliberately.
And still on the AfCFTA, the African Development Bank Group has signed $4.8 million institutional grant to the African Union for the implementation of the African Continental Free Trade Area Agreement AfCFTA. The grant forms part of a series of interventions by the bank in its lead role to accelerate implementation of the Free Trade Agreement, seen as a major force for integrating the 55 nations on the continent and transforming its economy. A statement from the AFDB says the African Union Commissioner for Trade and Industry, Albert Muchanga, signed for the continental body, while Obed Ando Mensah, who represented AFDB's Director of the Industrial and Trade Development Department, signed on behalf of the bank. The African Development Bank is expediting an investment drive into the special agro-processing zones in Nigeria to exploit the full potentials of the agriculture sector. AFDB's country director, Ibrahima Fall, said it was an effort in line with Nigeria's quest to attain self-sufficiency and reduce poverty. The bank is providing a veritable platform for investments and technology on one hand, and to cross-fertilize with available market space on the other hand, as it markets Nigeria to China. Is in line with the AFDB's country strategic paper in Nigeria to support development of sound policy and social inclusion and support infrastructure. Out of the $5 billion active portfolio of the bank in the country, only 8% is in agriculture, propelling this private sector investment drive. The Chinese growth experience is one the AFDB and Nigeria is seeking to infuse in the industry to enhance food security.
Over the next 5 years, which is a level of investment of close to $6 billion across the board. In agriculture, I think we expect that over the next 5 years, we should be able to invest close to $1 billion.
A lot of very interested partners in China, and including the very large scale companies and also some middle-sized companies, because of the advantages of the African continent. I'm sure there are more and more investors coming.
This process is aimed at removing barriers and granting potential investors access to the special agro-industrial processing zones that have started taking shape across the country following the federal government's agriculture advancement policy. Meanwhile, the Debt Management Office, DMO, has announced that the federal government savings bond established in May 2017 has recorded a total of 13.44 billion naira investments. A breakdown shows that 1.02 billion naira and 1.72 billion naira were recorded in the first and second quarters so far in 2019. Further analysis showed that 431 corporates invested 1.75 billion naira, while 15,822 individuals invested 11.75 billion naira, bringing the total amount to 13.5 billion naira. Last year, the bonds achieved 583 million naira in the first quarter, 740 million naira in the second quarter, 1.21 billion naira in the third, and 1.02 billion naira in the last. Now, Business Express will today look at efforts to step up revenue collection in the country and initiatives in the last 4 years as we begin the second tenure of President Muhammadu Buhari. What are the fiscal expectations? You'll find out after the break. Well, before we continue with the business of the day, Asian markets are mixed and European stocks trade higher as China moves to stabilize the yuan. Boss De Abel has a summary of stocks across the world.
The People's Bank of China set the official midpoint reference for yuan at 6.9 per dollar, which was slightly weaker than market expectations. China's central bank allows the exchange rate to rise or fall 2% from that number. However, this affected the performance of Asian stocks on Wednesday, 7th August, which traded mixed as investors kept a close watch on the Chinese yuan amid an escalating trade dispute between the US and China. The Shanghai Composite shed 0.32% to about 2,768.68. Nikkei slipped 0.33% to close at 20,516.56. And the Hang Seng Index fell as of its final hour of trading. European stocks traded higher as fears over the intensifying US-China trade war cooled slightly on the tentative stability of China's currency. US stocks futures were slightly higher amid simmering trade tensions between the world's two largest economies. In early trading, the Dow futures indicated a positive open of more than 45 points. Futures on the S&P and Nasdaq were slightly higher. While in Africa, stocks were mostly positive, but for Nairobi All Share Index, which depreciated by 147.31 points to 0.69%.
Other local market has closed and figures are beginning to trickle in. At the close of trade today, the oil share index slipped by 0.42%. It closed at 27,412.13 points. Volume of trade was 128.9 million, valued at 1.1 billion naira in 3,118 deals, while the market capitalization closed at 13.3 trillion naira. The top trades were FBN Holdings, Transcore, and FCMB. The gainers were Corn Oil, Dangote Flow, and MTN Nigeria, while the losing side was led by Dangote Cement, Red Star Express, and Flour Mills. Now, moving on, the petroleum products import statistics for the first quarter of 2019 shows that 5.61 billion liters of premium motor spirits PMS, 1.38 billion liters of automotive gas oil AGO, 12.22 million liters of household kerosene HHK, 131.36 million liters of aviation turbine kerosene, among others, were imported into the country. Statewide distribution of truck out volume for the shows that 5.18 billion of premium motor spirits PMS, 1.28 billion liters of automotive gas oil, 131.42 million liters of household kerosene, 176.14 million liters of aviation turbine kerosene, and 157.29 million of liquefied petroleum gas LPG were distributed nationwide. Still talking commodities, China's exit from U.S. agriculture gives a devastating blow to an already struggling sector. Let's see a graphic representation of domestic and international commodity prices. Now, good to know that you're still there, and today on the program we will be looking at the path for Nigeria's economic growth, even as the nation awaits a Minister of Finance to anchor the finance and economy of the nation. Our guest is Obinna Linus, an economist and a member of the Chartered Institute of Financial and Investment Analysts Nigeria. You're welcome to Business Express.
Thank you for inviting me.
All right, I think we should just hit the ground running. Give us a rundown, really. What is the incoming Minister of Finance coming to meet?
Well, thank you very much. As long as our economy is concerned, there is a lot, very, very much to be expected. Well, according to the global indices, every nation is expected to grow her economy by 3%, and that is the indices of the economy for 2019 and 2020. But when it comes to the country, it differs because there are developed countries and there are also developing countries. And in developing countries like ours, a lot is being expected, very, very much. You discover that the security in our country is much more to be desired. There is a lot to be done. And if our economy is actually to be moved forward, you discover that security, the incoming ministers must have to do something to make sure there is peace. And when peace thrives in an economy, you discover that development will take place. And not only that, you also discover that there are a lot of unemployment. Nigerians, as of today, we are talking about 193 million population in Nigeria. And whoever is coming must make sure that this will be at the back of his mind, that he is coming to deal with a lot more population.
Okay, so let me take you on the population now,
Yeah.
the growing population. Women are said to be better managers than men, and we've seen a lot of women since the incoming of the civilian unbroken 20 years record. Do you see a woman coming as the Minister of Finance?
Yes, well, this is relative because we are talking about individuals' capacity.
Exactly.
Yes, but I believe that from the record of the women that we have had so far, they've done wonderfully. And I pray if a woman comes on board, I'm sure the difference is going to be seen in our economy.
So do you see a different approach to the thorny issues of revenue generation, for instance, procurement, and then the whole gamut of the continuous audit as put in place by the president? Do you see it going another way, the approach so far?
Yeah, looking at what has happened in the last 4 years, we want to look at that the president has experimented the economy. Now, this second term in office, I'm sure it's going to be more pragmatic by making sure that the economy grows from the level it was as at 4 years ago when he came in. So I believe that a lot of things will be put in place to make sure that the economy is driven to a logical conclusion that every Nigeria will look at it that yes, this government has done something or is doing something. So this is one of the things that the president must make sure that the incoming ministers must address.
Okay, now just yesterday we heard that the Revenue Mobilization and Allocation Fiscal Commission is saying that in no distant time there will be a committee to review the federal allocation accounts sharing formula. Do you think it's time for that?
Well, I heard that yesterday in the news, but I was thinking, before these people should, the best thing to do is to allow them to come in. Let's see how the economy goes. Now, another thing we will look at that will help us to drive the economy, the power. Now, yesterday I heard in the news that the electricity has dropped to 2,500 megawatts. Now, a whole population of Nigeria for 193 million having to make use of 2,500 megawatts. Honestly, this is not it. So if something must be done right, if we must get it right to drive this economy to a logical conclusion, there must be an increase of power.
But
There must
power
be.
needs revenue to drive it.
Yes,
And we've had this consistent fiscal problem of inadequate revenue. In fact, our revenue to GDP ratio is not so impressive. So what are the pragmatic steps you think the incoming minister should take immediately?
Okay. There are a lot of multiple revenues. As of today, when we are talking about revenues, Nigerians are not happy. You know why? Because there is no proper education. There must be. Listen, if the road to my place is okay, I will be able to contribute in revenue. But all the payments of taxes that we have seen so far, there has not been judicious use of each of these revenues. So what we need is education.
But some would argue that that we are not even generating enough taxes. Our tax to GDP ratio is somewhere below 10%.
I don't agree with that. Enough revenue generation is being generated. But the only thing we need to do is to put the proper leadership where accountability is seen. Because a lot of generation is done, but the only problem is that there are diversion. What goes to the government is not all that is being generated. So we ask ourselves, all the money we say we have generated, where are they going? It goes into private pockets. So what the government will do is to make proper, now like you were talking about audit, we must make sure that every kobo that is generated is accounted for. When this thing is done, you will be surprised to notice that enough revenue generation is being done in this country.
So how much accountability are we talking about?
Well, I'm not saying it must be 100%. At least, if we generate out of 100%, accountability of 85-90% is done, Nigeria will not lack. Nigeria will lack.
Okay, you talked about education, the financial education. And just a couple of months back, the CBN governor, while rolling out his plan for the next 5 years, talked about financial inclusion. How do you think now this is going to tally with present realities, and what will now be on the fiscal side, the step to be taken that we will see a closer harmonization of policies, both on the fiscal side and the monetary side?
Yeah, in this regard, a lot of chartered institutes have been neglected. We discovered that the chartered institutes in Nigeria play a vital role. And what I feel that the government will do is to have a synergy with them, because they have so much to contribute in terms of seminar, in terms of education. Because as long as finance is concerned, the CBA should not be doing it alone. There must be a kind of collaboration between the CBN and all these financial institutions. Let's come together and rub minds. By so doing, we'll be able to get out the issues that are very pragmatic, the issues that are very important, that will help us in driving our economy. By the time everybody is involved, I can tell you, I can assure you, Nigeria will be out of the blues.
Okay. In the past, we've also had some grudges along the lines of the ministries are not collaborating with themselves. The agencies are also having their peculiar rivalries. So with that now, by your observation now, what do you expect them to be doing amongst themselves, the ministries and the agencies, in the next 4 years?
There must be right policies. When you make it mandatory that people should deliver services, once this is done at the back of our mind, everybody will key into that. But when there is no punishment as to those who actually go contrary to that, everything goes, there's no how people will sit up. And I believe that if the government will put a right policy, whoever that does not key into that policy is disgraced. By the time 1 or 2, 3 people are disgraced, others will sit up. And you discover that our problem in this country is in the implementation. We have quite a lot, but we are poor when it comes to implementation.
2017, the federal government came up with this ambitious plan, the ERGP, and we have just 1 year to go. It's elapsing next year.
Yes, I expect the federal government to also be more serious. When there is no accountability, when there is no supervision, what we need to do is to bring people that have relevant knowledge and information. There are people that are well versed in things, and if they are allowed to play their role, you discover that in Nigeria is that you can see somebody who read economics and he will be in charge of engineering. How do you expect that such will work? And that's one of the things we are seeing in this country. People are not potentially positioned to do that which they have comparative advantage.
Okay, so talking about the comparative advantage,
yes,
and the potentially positioned you have just mentioned now, what will you expect from the Minister of Finance that is coming in before the end of this month? What would you expect the minister to hit the ground running with?
Is to choose those who will work with him. Every
or her.
Or her. Yes, who will work with him or her. Every ministry has people to work with, or every minister has people to work with. All I expect the ministers to do, the issue of political divide should not be there. Let's get the best
Thank you very much, Mr. Linus, for coming on the program.
Thank you.
Now, moving on, we'll take a look at the foreign exchange market and what the numbers are saying. That brings us to the end of this edition of Business Express. You can access all previous episodes on YouTube, and you can also communicate with us on Twitter, and the handle is NTA News Now. The hashtag is BizExp. We value your feedback, so keep the mails coming and join us same time again on Friday. I am Leah Katung Babatunde saying, keep thinking and doing business. God bless Nigeria.